Hey, welcome back this week. We are looking at Colossians 1, 15 through 20, so make sure you read through that. Today we're in 15 through 17, and we're going to see how Jesus is first in creation. Now, the first thing we need to see is that Jesus is the image of God. Back when this letter was written, no one questioned whether Jesus was a man. They saw him, they talked to him, his enemies witnessed his lifeless body hanging on the cross. Was Jesus a man? Of course he was. But what would be the first question concerning Jesus? What would it be? Is he God? This was probably one of the questions that was circulating in the Colossian church. Yeah, a lot of people saw this Jesus guy, but you're saying he's God? Well, I doubt it. That's where Paul drops this paragraph on them. You don't think Jesus was also God? Here, take this. Jesus is the image of the invisible God. You know what images are, right? The Jews certainly did. The second commandment is that they were not to make any carved images to worship. They weren't supposed to take wood or metal and make an image of a false god or even of God himself. Of course, they did that right away with the golden calf, which they said, here's Yahweh. That's not the image. That image Moses broke down and made them drink it. The one true image of the invisible God was going to come. The one that would completely and perfectly represent the invisible God is Jesus. Do you want to know what God is like? You look at Jesus. Creating your own image, whether physical or imaginary, is a real slam against the one true image that came. If you think about Jesus in any other way than is stated in Scripture, then you've created a false image of God. If you change Jesus into something different, if you have this imaginary Jesus, if you imagine Jesus, if you think about him in a way that's not what's described in the Bible, then you have a different image of who God is. And that's a dangerous thing to do. You don't want to make a false image of God. And so we need to be careful of that. Now, Jesus is also the firstborn. He is the firstborn, not was. It doesn't say he was the firstborn. It says he is the firstborn. Now, you think I might be picky, but this is where cults put their teaching of Jesus as the first created being. That's not what this says. He is the firstborn of all creation. What is the firstborn? The prototokos is the word. Well, the firstborn is the heir of the father. Remember the story of Jacob and Esau? Esau was the first one that was born, but he was not the firstborn. He traded that place to Jacob. Jacob was the secondborn, firstborn. You see, firstborn can refer to natural birth or it can refer to legal standing. Jesus is the firstborn of all creation. If you take this into context, it makes more sense that Jesus is legally the firstborn, not that he was created first. In the parable of the evil tenants, Jesus said that he is the heir of the Father. Hebrews 1:2 tells us that Jesus is the heir of all things. This is basically what Paul says here. Jesus is the firstborn, the heir of all creation. He has inherited all of creation. All creation belongs to him. The amazing thing is that Jesus has made us Christians co-heirs with him. So Jesus has made us co-heirs with himself. Let me add this into the mix. Romans 8:29 says, "For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers." So we believers are predestined to be made into the image of the Son, who is the image of the invisible God, so that Jesus would be the firstborn over us. Is he just like us? Is he us? No. But he was made to be the firstborn. That's where the cults kind of get a little tricky there, because they're like, well, you see, he's firstborn. He was the one who was born first. But that's not what this term always means. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it means it's the first one that comes out of the womb. But it doesn't, like the created things, we don't call them firstborn. Like Adam wasn't the firstborn. He was the first made. So why would Jesus be the firstborn if he was created? Some like the LDS Church has Jesus and Satan as brothers. It's like, well, you can't use this to argue that. It just means that he's the heir of all things. That means he has the legal status of firstborn. That means he gets all the good stuff. So, and then we get to be co-heirs with him. It's the idea of inheritance of what you own. That's the idea here. Not that, he is literally the first one to be born or the first created being. That would be contradictory even to the context that we have here. So all you got to do is read the rest of it and you realize, well, that doesn't make any sense. So it has to mean this. You eliminate the other possibilities, and this is the one that you have that makes the most sense. Because then you get the next one, which is that Jesus is the creator. That's what verse 16 tells us. A lot of Christians say that the Father is the creator, but if you asked if Jesus is the creator, they might hesitate. I'm not sure. Well, let's get this straight. The creation of the universe was done by the triune God. The creation of the universe was done by the triune God. Most people separate the Godhead way beyond what the Bible does. God revealed himself to us in three persons. One God, three persons, not three gods. The verse shows us that Jesus is creator. He's creator of all things. Now, our friends in the cults will say that he created everything after he was created. But that's not what this says. That's what we call eisegesis, a reading into the text something it does not actually say or intend to mean. This verse says that all things were created. And then we are told that all things, what all things are. Anything that is on earth or in heaven was created by him. Anything that is visible, meaning material, and invisible, meaning immaterial or spiritual. We are given some examples of what invisible things were created. He created thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. This is most likely a reference to spiritual beings. If you look at Ephesians 3:10, Paul talks about the rulers and authorities in heavenly places. In Ephesians 6:12, he talks about the rulers against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Jesus created the spiritual realm, even those who would betray him, like Lucifer. They are not brothers like the LDS Church teaches us. Paul did not want us to get this wrong, so he clarifies. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things. He's before all things. And in him, all things hold together. Jesus created everything. He is not created. He came before anything that is created, and everything continues to exist because he holds all things together. That's the amazing truth of the incarnation, that Jesus as a baby in the manger and a grown man dying on the cross was at the same time holding all things together. This is who Jesus is. This is the amazing thing. This is why we get to the second part, where he talks about how he's first in the church and how we relate to him. And so we need to get this part right. He's not a created being. He was not the first birthed being, that he was firstborn. And even in the LDS Church, that's not even, they have other gods that came before Yahweh God. So I'm not sure how that completely works, but in this, I guess for this world, he was the firstborn. But that doesn't make any sense. According to this passage, he created all things, whether it's visible or invisible, which would include himself. He created that, and then he became visible by taking on a body, but he was always invisible before that. So if all things are created by him, you have to throw in there an exception clause that's not actually in that passage. Well, but him himself is what it says. It's not in there. He is this. He is the firstborn right now. He was the firstborn. He is, and so that points to the legal title. Now we'd also say he's firstborn from the dead, because the Bible talks about that in other places as well. So he's the first one that came back from the dead. He's the first resurrected person, and so he can be an heir and would be the first one of many brothers that would be and sisters that would be resurrected as well. So you could throw that in there too, but it seems to be more. It doesn't actually say that of the dead. It says he's just the firstborn, which really points to the fact that, and then it talks about being an heir. Really, that's what we're talking about then. So, makes sense if you stop and think about it. If you don't read your thoughts back into it, read someone else's thoughts back into it. That's what it's clearly saying, and that's what we should go with. This is who Jesus is. So next time we'll take a look at who Jesus is to the church. He's first in the church. He's first in creation, first overall. If there's anything that is created, he's over that. He is above that. That is his. And so when we get to the church, we're going to see the same thing.